Hello and welcome back to another episode of the MVP podcast. My name is Anthony Mero.
And I'm Phil Van Pelt. And thank you guys, as always, for joining us on the MVP podcast. I'm excited as ever. We're rolling. We got the East Coast finished up last week for you guys on predictions, projections on what we think 4-1. Now we're on to the South. We're going backwards from how we did it last year, but we're on to the South, NFC South and AFC South. I got to say, as I was kind of looking at this and putting stuff together, it's as a whole, and thankfully it kind of knocks out in one shoot here. The least exciting, I would say. Still got a lot of details, a lot of stuff for you guys. But as far as two divisions that are arguably maybe the two of the worst divisions in football to me, and I'm not sure about you, Anthony, but I mean, I think we're kind of hitting them out in one foul swoop here. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to get this going though, because despite that, there's still a lot of interesting things to talk about and how these teams are trending. So I'm going to throw it to Anthony with his number 4 pick in the NFC South. I feel like the South, we're going to be fairly similar top to bottom, and I'm excited to see who he has it for, because then I'll know for sure. Anthony, what do you got it for?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, right? The Atlanta Falcons are not going to be good this year. They're one of the worst teams. They're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst. Going from Matt Ryan to Marcus Mariota is a drop off for sure. But this is what a rebuild looks like, right? We touched on it last year with the Texans, and the Falcons are trying to build through the draft with cornerstone talent like Kyle Pitts that they got last year. Maybe the 2023 draft class has a franchise quarterback for them. They keep touting that this is going to be a QB heavy draft for next year. So this year is just about developing those young guys. Their draftees, Drake London at receiver, Desmond Ridder at quarterback, may offer something more to look forward to, but these Falcons have a very low ceiling and a horrible floor. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for them. Calvin Ridley suspended for gambling, betting on his own team to win, such a stupid rule. Dante Fowler got cut. Foy left for greener pastures, so their front 7 is basically in shambles. I think they're probably going to win around 4 games at most. I have them realistically, though, as a 3-win team. I think this is going to be a 3-14 year. That's my prediction. It's going to be a long season for Falcons fans.
Yeah, so I'm right there with you. I have the Falcons at 4, and I have them going 3-14 as well.
Wow.
They weren't great last year. They kept surprising teams randomly. They got, en route to that 7-10 season. They finished it. It was just surprising, but I think it points to consistency at the quarterback position that Matt Ryan provides a lot more of than who they have now. Now, the quarterback situation is a different thing. I'm going to get to that in a second. Obviously, it's a lot different now, but like you mentioned, they lost their number 1 receiver, Calvin Ridley. He's suspended for the whole year for gambling. Kyle Pitts was good last year, but I think he only scored 1 touchdown. Drake London and him, I think that's a decent combination because those are 2 big receiving threats. You still have a do-it-all player, Cordarrelle Patterson, but to me, who's the quarterback? Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder, whoever it is between those 2, they add a ground element to it that's going to help the offense any way it can. I didn't even touch on their offensive line in this, honestly, but my bet is that Marcus Mariota is going to start the season. I think Desmond Ridder will be playing by at least the midway point, because honestly, you're not competitive if you're not winning a lot of games. Even if you're not winning a lot of games, even if you are competitive, what's the point in playing Marcus Mariota? And that sucks for him because he still has hopes to potentially turn his career around and be something that's, and guys do it at different times. Maybe he does and he becomes a franchise quarterback for them. But honestly, you spent a decent pick, and he was a third or fourth round pick off the top of my head, I think 4th, Desmond Ridder. And you're going to want to see what he is at some point. So he's going to get in. And when he gets in, maybe he gets in and then gets pulled for Mariota comes back. But at some point, because maybe he gets in, he's over his head. You put Mariota back in, and that's normal. He's a young guy, you come in and it's too much, but eventually I think they're going to throw him in. They're going to throw him to the fire and throw him to the wolves, because who cares? This isn't about how you finish. Like you talk about, it's rebuilding. So see what you have, because maybe, just maybe, he shows you enough down the road here where you go, if we finish with a top pick, let's take the best available offensive lineman or receiver or something, because we think maybe we have something in Desmond Ridder here. So you got to see that for sure. So for me, that's a big part of this season. They were honestly, this team though, they were outscored by 146 points last year, 5th worst in the league. They lost a future Hall of Fame quarterback, Matt Ryan. I believe he'll be in the Hall of Fame one day. Defensively, I don't think they're going to be good. AJ Terrell was, he was great last year, but there needs to be a bigger sample size for me, a little bit more. I don't think that he's going to fall off a cliff, but we see regression from corners from year to year, corners that don't put it up consistently year in and year out, right? So we see those corners, Ramsey, Jalen Ramsey, Davian Howard, Jerry Alexander, that put it up consistently. I feel a little similar with Denzel Ward in Cleveland. I just need to see it again, because after you maybe put it up for a year or so and you look great, but then it kind of tend to kind of fall off a cliff here. So I want to see it again. But even if he balls out, Grady Jarrett and Deion Jones have been stars for that team for years, but both of them are coming off career low grades. And for Jarrett, he had a career low in grade and pressure on the quarterback. Not a good sign. This team, like you mentioned, low ceiling, but super, super low floor. And I don't mean that in any kind of it's low. It is low. So I'm talking 3 wins. This team I could see this team, honestly, I could see this team winning a game or two. Then I could also see this team, but somehow ball bounces your way. You get lucky breaks at the Lions. We talked about last year not getting. Maybe a few of those happen for the Falcons and they go their way. Maybe they win 5 games. I would be shocked if the Falcons, literally shocked if the Falcons end up with any more than 6 wins. And that's with luck. That's what things happening. Yeah. And who knows that we get shocked every year. There's teams that are going to come out that no one predicts. Hopefully we predict one right. I don't, it's a luck. There's always teams supposed to be garbage that kill it. Teams are supposed to be great that fall. But yeah, I agree with you. 3-14 for the Falcons for me. Next in third place, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, I think it's pretty consistent here. The Carolina Panthers. But surprisingly, they had a pretty good offseason.
I had the Buccaneers. I'm kidding.
Oh, let's say for real? Okay, we're way off on this.
All
right, yeah, no. So I have the Panthers coming up in 3. They're not good yet, but I think they're trending in the right direction. Obviously, on the defensive side of things, losing Hassan Reddick and Stephon Gilmore hurts a lot. But at least they have a ton of corners to kind of cover up losing Gilmore. And J.C. Horn potentially being healthy, coming back from the injury he had last season. He missed all but the first 3 weeks. May be able to help as well. They built a better offensive line in the offseason. Now it's all about the quarterback for them, right? Now, that was the big problem last year. Newton, Darnold. Now it's Baker and Darnold. Who is it going to be? I'm a fan of what Baker can bring to them. He should be incredibly motivated. Obviously, injuries are a concern, but he should be motivated to fight for a starting spot and a solid payday, right? This is a contract year for him after his Cleveland disaster, all the problems that he just went through, a new environment, maybe just what he needs to build back that value. The Panthers do have some weapons for him, especially if McCaffrey is healthy after 2 years back-to-back of just injury problems. If he comes back, he's one of the best backs in the league. Both with phenomenal catching hands and a solid runner. So with everything going their way at the moment, I can see the Panthers having a solid, but still a negative record season. I have them going 7-10 with their ceiling being about 9-8. So pretty close to that ceiling. And that's if everything goes their way. I'm being optimistic for this team. I think that they're trending in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work to be done here.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The Panthers, I do have them improving from last year. I do have them in third place, though, like you do. The Sam Darnold trade sucked for them. It was a disaster. They had just 1 pick in the first 75 picks last year because of it. And a team that needs help, I mean, that was bad. They got to have more picks than that. Remember them starting 3-0? I know you do because you talked about it in our predictions and you were super pumped. Oh, I think this team is going to be that. I think this team is better than people think. Sam Darnold may be better than people think. I heard it from you every week. Here we go. The Panthers are going to keep rolling. They're going to be in a good direction here. The Panthers are going to be a playoff team, 3-0. Look at them go. And that's where the fun stopped because they finished 5-12. 5-12. Their final win was week 10. They were outscored by 100 points in the season. They got better because I 100%, and they will be better. I 100% agree and believe that they're going to get more consistency from Baker than they did Darnold because they just will. Baker is better than Darnold. Now, I don't think all that's Darnold's fault. I think he's been set up to fail in a lot of situations. I think he didn't go into a good situation at all with the Jets and obviously Adam Gase. And then he came into a situation in Carolina that, let's face it, is falling apart and is in need of a massive reboot too. So I don't know that necessarily Sam Darnold's career is over, but I think Sam Darnold's career in Carolina is over and he needs to go somewhere else where he's got a shot with a team that maybe says, you know what, we're going to give you a fair shake with it, that has an opening. He can go into a place that has weapons and see if he can be successful in a stint. Maybe end up in a situation where, Matt Ryan retires and the Colts brought him in and he got an opportunity to win the job and he's got a solid squad around him. Maybe something like that happens and you see what the guy can do. But until that time, I'm not sold on Sam Darnold, obviously. And I don't think there's any way he's going to be the quarterback. Again, I think Baker could potentially be the quarterback of the future for the Panthers. And he'll get another shot, even if the Panthers don't sign him this year, unless he just bottoms out. But the whole situation in Cleveland that you referenced, that wasn't his fault. I mean, the guy got him to the playoffs. He won a playoff game for a team that has been just bottom of the barrel for years.
It's true.
He's been the most successful quarterback. And now they might not have Deshaun Watson for the year, like we talked about. So, the Browns make interesting decisions. I guess it's pressure based on not having one and feeling like you're close. So we really need to take a big swing at this. Interesting swing because you don't know what you're getting. And Deshaun Watson, at least in the first preseason game, limited action, but he's got more accusations against him than he did yards. So as far as that first game goes, which is not a good correlation. Now, again, stuff is settled. I'm not saying anyone's guilty. We know how that stuff is gone. It just is kind of a unique way to put it. So that's why I wanted to do that. But again, I like Baker more than Darnold. I like the Deontay Foreman pickup for them for that offense because you know what you're not going to get? You're not going to get 16 games out of Christian McCaffrey. So forget the whole thing about him being great because I know he was great. He was great. But now at the most violent, most beat up position in football, he's shown he hasn't been able to stay healthy, which is what everybody feared coming out. And then he was able to stay healthy for a year or two, killed it. For a little bit, he killed it. He was a great running back. But that plays a toll a little bit on your performance, how you play, right? I mean, the way you cut, stuff like that, it's just going to change you a little bit. And we saw he starts to kind of come back to earth a little bit. So he went from best running back in the league to this guy might not be, he might be signing some kind of a backup contract soon, depending on, a high upside contract, because we don't know right now. All we know is this guy can't stay healthy. I don't really have to say anything else about that, but I like keeping Dante Jackson and Xavier Woods coming over from Minnesota. I like that pickup. I'll finish with more wins, but honestly, less wouldn't be shocking to me. And the reason I say that is just because I think that the bet is good. It's a good bet to say that Matt Rule might be the first coach fired this year. And that doesn't mean Carolina doesn't have pieces to build upon and that they can't continue to grow. And that, Baker could still be the future. They could have success, but we see teams have success and players, but they're just not winning for whatever reason. And that could be the coaching. And then we see the other way, which I'll get to in the next division, where we see the coaching kind of overachieve for the talent around him kind of situation. So eventually that kind of evens back out. We're talking about that with New England last week to an extent. Talent's down. I know the coaching is there. Where does that leave you? I think this leaves the Panthers at 6-11. So a 1-win improvement over last year, a better team overall from the pieces standpoint. I like your point about getting JC Horn back, but I still think it's going to end with Matt Rule getting fired unless they make the playoffs. So with that, what kind of a team do you get in those kind of years? It's always hard to predict.
That's true. And that's solid. We're only one win apart there. They seem to be trending in the right direction. I agree with everything you said with Sam Darnold kind of adopting or being adopted into kind of a disaster situation. They didn't even know what they wanted. And at least now there's some level of stability. Their offseason was pretty good. They made proper decisions, good moves, good signings. They built a better O-line. They did as much as they possibly could without breaking the bank. This is a rebuild, but at least they're taking the steps in the right direction. There's some level of consistency, and I think you can put a level of confidence in the front office at this point right now specifically, because we don't know what's going to happen later. But right now, it seems like they're making winning decisions, but not for this year. Definitely for the future.
Building blocks for the future.
Yeah, exactly. Taking the steps for a rebuild. But that leads me into number 2. I think the New Orleans Saints, obviously, I think we kind of are on the same page that the Bucs are still the head and shoulders best of this division. But the Saints are a wild card, right? Their roster is insanely talented. You have Alvin Kamara, one of the best running backs in the game, also potentially avoiding suspension for now with his assault charges. We don't know what's going to come of that yet. We have Michael Thomas, who missed all of last year, but when he was healthy, was one of the best receivers in the game. And they just signed Jarvis Landry, who is a phenomenal receiver as well. So they have a lot of offensive weaponry. If Kamara doesn't get suspended and Thomas can nip his ankle issues in the bud, that's a dynamic receiver back duo, potentially the best in the league. And that's to match their defense, which is already one of the best in the league. And they just added Tyrann Mathieu, the honey badger, for some extra help. Losing Sean Payton obviously sucks. A Hall of Fame coach does not grow on a tree, but they replace him with Dennis Allen, who has been with the team as their defensive coordinator for the last 6 years now. So there's going to be some level of coaching consistency. Obviously, there's going to be a bit of a learning curve, and their defense has been amazing during his tenure. Obviously, the pieces have something to do with it, but he's doing something on the sidelines that helps. The problem here is that Jameis Winston he's kind of a limitation at quarterback, right? He's coming off of an ACL tear now, which should keep him out for at least a few more weeks. Andy Dalton, I think, is filling in for now, but there's still a question mark for that team. Even with how good this team is, and they got better, except for the two most important jobs in all of the NFL, quarterback and coach. And I think that limiter is what's going to keep them around a 500 record. And that's why I'm rolling with a 9-8.
Wow. So far, we've been exact on two of these. I have the Saints going 9-8 as well. It's funny to me because, like you mentioned, the biggest thing for me is Sean Payton not being the head coach anymore. So I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned. The Alvin Kamara thing, from what I saw, he might not see charges till the following year, depending on how long this drags out, because it's one of those things where he can play until he's guilty, right? So if nothing goes through, he might get through this whole season before there's charges brought on him. So who knows what that looks like? Yes, getting Michael Thomas back is going to be huge. But let's be real here. Sean Payton had 152-89 record, and he won a Super Bowl as head coach. Dennis Allen moved up to head coach, like you mentioned, from the defensive coordinator position, and they kept Pete Carmichael at offensive coordinator. So the continuity's there, but Payton was successful for a long time. So it's going to make a difference somehow. 9-8 is where they finished last year. They get Jameis back, like you mentioned too. They were 5-2 before he got hurt last year. We all talked about that. We remember when that happened. Brutal. He was playing pretty good football. They're 5-2. Hurts his knee, tore his ACL, and he hurt his MCL in that as well. That's another piece to that puzzle. They're in better shape this year if he does get hurt because they had an Andy Dalton. So as far as a more consistent quarterback, than having Ian Book out there and Taysom Hill, who's, maybe going to do something on the ground, but then turn it over a lot and fumble. And then, he's good in his position of Taysom Hill can go out there and be a gadget player, make plays sometimes, throw the ball a couple times a game, but not throw you back into a game. That's not necessarily his thing. He's talented. So he'll have big throws if he's trying to throw you back into a game, but he'll also have a lot of mistakes in there. So being able to use him consistently like that gadget player, I think is the best bet for them. So I want to see them be able to continue to do that and not have to rely on that guy as your first string quarterback. And I think having Andy Dalton definitely helps that for sure. But I do think that Jameis is going to regress back a little bit to what we know him for. And that's potentially, it's turning the ball over. Some of that has to do with Sean Payton. I know, again, he was great last year. Getting Thomas back is huge, absolutely huge addition if he's like the old Mike Thomas, because he was arguably the best receiver in football. Guy had a killer year a couple years ago before he got hurt. Monster season, one of the best we've ever seen a wide receiver have. But he had Drew Brees throwing the ball. Brees got hurt in there, I know, but he also, Teddy came in. Teddy was steady, but steady Teddy, right? But you also had, again, you had Sean Payton and was leading that team. You knew what you were getting. Dennis Allen didn't have a particular successful head coaching stint when he was the Raiders head coach back in the day. Now, guys get better. They learn, they improve. He's in a better system now than he was with the Raiders when they were in Oakland at that time. I get that. But I do have to wonder if Mike Thomas is going to be the Mike Thomas, at least straight out of the gate. Now, you mentioned Jarvis Landry is huge. They drafted Chris Olave from Ohio State. They love Ohio State guys. They have success with them like crazy. We go back and say, I think, did Marcus Williams play at Ohio State? Or it might have been Von Bell that played at Ohio State. I'm going to look that up real quick. They also drafted Chris Olave. And, you mentioned bringing in Jarvis Landry. They love guys from Ohio State. Just a quick list here. Chris Olave obviously played for Ohio State. Mike Thomas did. Marshawn Lattimore, Pete Werner, Bradley Roby, Eli Apple, Malcolm Jenkins. I know some of those guys aren't there right now as far as Malcolm Jenkins just retired. But they have success with guys from Ohio State. They draft a lot of them. So history says that this guy's going to come in and be successful. Mike Thomas, him, Jarvis Landry, that's pretty big. They drafted Trevor Penning. He's not going to replace Armstead, at least not yet, because Armstead is so good. But they have that phenomenal success just in history across the offensive line. And they've drafted really well. So I got to say that these guys should take that next step. But again, I just got to hold back a little and say how much of that is on Sean Payton. And I don't think I need to really overstate anymore. Like you talked about Tyrann Mathieu, but remember they did lose. I just talked about Malcolm Jenkins to retirement, but they also lost Marcus Williams to the Baltimore Ravens. They brought in Marcus May from the Jets, but he was coming off of, I believe, a torn Achilles. So you have a higher, playmaker ceiling wise as far as Tyrann Mathieu, and that's big. He played at LSU. He's playing back in New Orleans. He's back in Louisiana, just like Jarvis Landry, who played at LSU. That's huge. So ultimately, if Marcus May can get healthy, he's younger, has more upside, but it still seems like a lateral move at safety. They're making win now moves, though. They made win now moves for a team that's consistently kicked the can down the road for free agency, as far as, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Just keep kicking these down, guaranteeing contracts, owing guys all this money. They've been in cap hell every year. They have to get out of it, get under the cap, restructure. Cap will keep going up, but they keep doing this. Eventually, like I've said for a while, you got to pay the piper. And to me, this year is going to be huge. If they fall in their face, Dennis Allen experiment, that experiment's going to be short-lived, and they're going to blow it up, I think. Finishing the same, though, might be enough to make the playoffs in the NFC, though, because I think the NFC is definitely the weaker of the two conferences.
Yeah.
I think the Saints have a lot of talent. You have some older guys like Cam Jordan that are starting to get up there. You've hit it out of the park a lot of places on draft, with draft picks. But it's a really unique situation because I see the Saints. The Saints wouldn't shock me if they won 11 games, but the Saints really wouldn't shock me if they won 7 games. It's just one of those things, because what Jameis are you going to get? Everything is set up. Look at how good he did last year, 5-2 before he got hurt. But will that be consistent? Because the rest of his career so far, we have seen him play good in stretches, but also be pretty up and down, have big things. I mean, he had a 5,000 yard season when he his last year with the Bucks, I think. And then, but he also threw 30 interceptions and fumbled like 10 times and had like 6 other interception worthy plays or multiple other for turnover worthy plays. So you're sitting here going, geez, man, what are we going to get out of this guy? So that to me is really the big, you mentioned a liability. I think that's a big piece here, that you don't know what you're going to get. So I have him going 9-8. Same with you.
Yeah, man. I mean, this team, that's why I call them a wild card, right? Because you wouldn't be surprised with
I think
a high ceiling. There will be a wild card. But no, like what I mean is they have a really high ceiling and also a really low floor. I had them pegged right in the middle. And it's one of those teams where things have to go right for them. And obviously, sometimes just embracing the rebuild makes sense. It kind of sucks to get stuck in the middle, but it's football, right? All you need is one win, one and done. So you make the playoffs, anybody has a fighter's chance. We just saw the Bengals do something amazing. So pushed us to the number 1 seed, which is obviously unanimous. Tampa Bay Bucks. They had probably one of the weirdest off seasons, right? What's going to happen? Tom Brady goes out, a lot of uncertainty. He retired. Excitement. He comes back. I think it was 47 days. I believe he was retired for like a day longer than Kim Kardashian's first marriage. It was pretty hilarious there. They lose Bruce Arians, but they also replace him with Todd Bowles. So, a little bit of adjustment. Defensive coordinator, same thing with the Sean Payton, Dennis Allen trade up. But some level of continuity, right? He knows the players. He has the playbook. He kind of can assimilate a little more. Bruce Arians is going to be a hard person to replace, though. Then there was some doubt, right? Ryan Jensen blows his knee in the first week of OTAs. You lose JPP, and Ndamukong Suh is kind of stuck in a bit of no man's land with his free agency. Is he going to retire? Is he going to sign? Kind of up in the air, still there. Gronk retired. They kind of reload a little bit. You bring on Logan Ryan and Akeem Hicks. So there's something there. You sign Julio Jones to add another receiver to your team. And if anyone can squeeze more life out of that career, it is absolutely Tom Brady. Even with the rotation of players and OTA injuries, the NFC South, we just talked about it. These are 2 of the weakest divisions right now, and the NFC South probably is the weakest division in the entire NFL. The Bucks have at least a slate of 4 easy games being in this division, with the other 2 being their Achilles heel with the Saints. Or can they beat them? But I can see them having an absolute bomb season with a floor of 9 wins and a ceiling of 12. With Brady, though, as long as he's healthy, I can't see the Bucks going any less than 11-6. They sneak the division title for the 2nd straight year.
Yeah, I have the Bucks winning this. They tied for the best record last year in football with Green Bay, I believe it was. Brady swerved retirement once again. They outscored their opponents last year by 158 points. They did lose Gronk to retirement. They get Chris Godwin back. They still have Mike Evans. That's big time. They added Julio Jones, which, like you mentioned, even though people think he's washed, I mean, look at who he's playing with now. So now he's going to be the 3rd guy there, and it's Brady. So he's going to have a consistent, decent year. All he's got to do is stay healthy. We know the guy can catch anything. So he can go out there and do his thing, and he will not get the lion's share of the coverage with Mike Evans out there and Chris Godwin out there too. Mike Evans is very underrated as a receiver. The the yards and the stats this guy puts up. I mean, I've shared some of these with you. These
Yeah.
memes you talk about receivers. Devontae Adams. Go look at Devontae Adams' stats and Mike Evans' stats against each other head to head, like the last couple of years. Not putting them head to head when they're playing each other, but as far as like what their stats are, they're pretty freaking comparable. It's crazy.
Yep.
But yet Devontae Adams is viewed as the best receiver in football with, Tyreek Hill and people, obviously Cooper Kupp, the year he had last year, Justin Jefferson, guys like that. But people, for whatever reason, tend to forget about Mike Evans. The guy is big time.
Yep.
They did trade for Shaq Mason after losing Alex Kappa, kind of an offset move there. They lost Ryan Jensen, like you talked about, maybe for the year. That hurts a lot at center. I say maybe because there was still hope a little bit ago that he would be able to potentially come back. We'll see if that happens. They lost Ali Marpet to retirement. The offensive line is going to be pretty darn good again. The receiving core, same thing. Running back's going to be by committee with Fournette getting the lion's share of the carries. It's going to be backed up by Rashad White and Keyshawn Vaughn. Giovanni Bernard's there too. They did lose Jordan Whitehead to the Jets. Jordan Whitehead was good for them. Secondary was kind of the weak link, but they return a lot of the same guys. The majority of their squad on defense, aside, you mentioned Ndamukong Suh and stuff like that. Vita Vea, I think, he adjusted his contract to help guys there.
Yep.
But teams don't run the ball against them at all. So they gave up the most completions and attempts last year through the air. That's something they're going to want to change. Todd Bowles is a defensive head coach. A lot of games are won through the air in this league, and they're still going to be good. Division's weak. So is the conference. They're going to take this division 12-5 for the Bucs is what I have.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair record. The team is still really good despite everything negative that we just mentioned in terms of their free agency losses, the retirement losses, the injury losses, the head coach change.
Look at that offensive line for the most part. Look at the defensive line and look at the receiving core, and you still have Brady. People, maybe this is the year Brady falls off a cliff and just is not the dude anymore. And he played long enough to see himself suck. Maybe, but I'm just tired of being like, are we going to predict it? Maybe he does it, and everyone will be wrong at that point. I'm just not going to say. I think the guy has enough wherewithal and stuff that I think he thinks he'll keep playing until there's something that changes enough in him that he goes, I'm not going to have the year. So I think he'll call it I think he came back because the taste of the last game was sour, losing that game that they could have come back and won against the Rams.
Yeah.
Who went on to win the Super Bowl, and that he feels like he can still do it. So plus he's going to shatter every record because he's going to keep playing. He already has every record, but he's going to make it like untouchable.
That's the GOAT, man. That's what he does. But let's shift over to the AFC. Coming in at number 4 for the AFC, I have the Texans. You're looking at the very bottom of the league, but not for a lack of effort. They had a really good draft and a really productive offseason, getting in premier talents like Stingley, Jalen, and Kenyon Green that can be immediate impact players on the O-line and in their secondary, but there's still so much work to be done. This is a very young team. The franchise made good money decisions, though, to keep their cap clear for the future. And they removed a massive distraction in Deshaun Watson and continued to build through the draft. What was their return on Deshaun? They had 3 first-round picks, 2022, 2023, and 2024, with an additional... Rappaport reports 3 first-round picks, 2023 third-rounder and a 2024 fourth-rounder. So that's a haul, right? You're getting a haul of picks back. Even if it's 4 first-round picks, it's just more, right? Like they have a lot of opportunity to continue to build through this draft. And getting rid of the distraction is more important. It's worth its weight in gold. So now that's the Browns' problem. They got to figure it out. All the question marks for whatever, we could touch on that when we get to the North. But they got to figure out all these issues. And they don't have to anymore in Texas. It was a pleasant surprise last year, too, with Davis Mills at quarterback. There was a little stretch there where he looked like probably the best rookie quarterback. And it was surprising because it was what, Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, or Mac Jones. That was the trifecta. And then Davis Mills came out of nowhere and was like, hey, I'm pretty darn good too. Maybe a second year with some clarity from the franchise and a little bit of direction from them as well. He could be a little bit better. There's no more cloud hanging over his head. Like, I'm going to be a bencher when Deshaun comes back. No, I'm the guy right now, at least for right now. He has something to prove. I can see something coming from him in another solid year, but it's not going to translate to a lot of wins. This is not really a good team. They're building, so they should still be bad. I see the Texans going 4-13.
Here we go again. I mean, you would think, guys, that we talk about this beforehand, and no, we don't, because we have been. This is funny. We've been across the board so far pretty just on the same page here. I have the Texans going 4-13 as well. They're one of the
Wow.
worst teams in the league last year. I think they're going to be at it again. If Lovie Smith can get this team on the right track and Davis Mills improves, maybe they sneak another win. But I could also see them winning 3 games. They finally got rid of Deshaun Watson, excuse me. You mentioned getting rid of that distraction is gigantic.
Yep.
And I do believe that they should be punished themselves for their role in the Deshaun Watson stuff, just because we see Deshaun Watson getting punished. But there's a bunch of stuff coming out there about, the NDAs that the Texans, from what I understand, the Texans were a part of this to an extent, as far as kind of bearing some of this stuff. They were fine with it airing out when he said peace. But again, if you're part of that, why aren't we looking at the Texans a little bit more here? Interesting to see if that happens. More than likely won't happen because everybody's focused on Deshaun with that. And it is Deshaun's situation. But again, the team had any play at all, and I think we should look at them a little closer. And again, I'm not saying they have to be. There's an investigation that needs to be undertaken. Excuse me, but we'll see if anything comes of that. That's really, I guess, all I can say at this point. But this season for them is about finding long-term pieces to build the squad back up and maximizing that draft capital that they got from that Deshaun Watson trade. We've seen a lot of teams flip around quickly doing this. The Bills were a big example. Look at how they were flipping the team, kind of tearing it apart. And now look at how they are. Just a couple years later, they hit on Josh Allen. They have a solid team. They're Super Bowl favorites in a lot of people's minds. Up there with a couple of teams, they're right at the top. And the Dolphins, my Dolphins did that, the tank for 2 a year that they weren't tanking. That's been proven now. And just strip the roster to its core. And then you had back-to-back winning seasons looking to take that next step. The Chargers, teams like that have stripped stuff down. It's been shown things can flip quick in the NFL. So hopefully they can do that. To me, it's about identifying who you want to keep and who's a tradable piece. I think Laramie Tunsil is a tradable piece. My Finns got a haul that's still reaping benefits from that as far as trades go from trading Laramie Tunsil. And I can see him getting traded. I do think Jerry Hughes and Jonathan Green are going to be a decent pairing getting after the passer. On the defensive line, I think Nico Collins is going to be a good pairing for Brandon Cooks with another year, another step for him potentially with Davis Mills. Just not a great squad overall, 4-13 for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good team, right? But all those draft picks are going to, pay massive dividends for them going forward. And at least they seem... Yeah, you have to hit on them. But the more picks you have, the more opportunities, right? You're just buying multiple lotto tickets. So hopefully they actually get some solid picks there. For me, number 3, sneaky team alert, the Jacksonville Care Bears, the Jaguars. They made a ton of moves this offseason. They really doubled down on Trevor Lawrence's potential. His second year should see some improvement. And he was already pretty good towards the end of the season there. There's no more Urban Meyers hanging above everybody's head. They got Doug Peterson taking over. So there's some stability at the helm of this ship. We're not going to have any more of this drama. This guy getting lap dances at a bar, all the stuff that apparently he was doing in a locker room. He was kicking people. Is weird. A lot of weird things were happening under Urban Meyer. And now Doug Peterson is weird. Yeah, weird guy. I didn't think he was going to be that awkward. He's a historically good NCAA coach, but apparently a historically bad NFL coach. Doug Peterson's going to give them some.
We talked about it. I thought he'd have a weird success, with some big failure, but a weirdly, more success than people thought with the Jags, just based on his college career. And then he would end up getting fired or leaving, not getting fired, but leaving in a year or two because of health problems or something like that. It just went a lot different.
It kind of went backwards, right? He had weird failure. It was just awkward. It was just such a weird situation going on with him. And, now you're going to have some level of stability and professionalism at the helm with Doug Peterson. The Jags did overpay for a ton of pass catchers in Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Zay Jones, but that's a solid receiver core. So that's that investment towards Trevor that he didn't have last season. But what makes them a sneaky team for me is how light their schedule is. They have at least 6 games against bottom feeder teams like the Jets, the Giants, the Texans, and the Lions. So that's 4 teams that are very easily beatable with the Jaguars' improved roster. But I don't want to say easily beatable, but that are beatable teams. The Jaguars' improved roster, they have a chance, right, to win maybe 5 of those games, maybe 4. They go 4-2 in that stretch. That's already, 4 wins to your docket. That's more than you had last season. But they have the opportunity at least to punch above their weight with some of these moves. They can be competitive this season, and I'm looking forward to see what James Robinson can do for them as well after what he did last year. Did a phenomenal job last year. He was kind of like their little engine that could. He was what kept them in most of their games. So another year of him. hopefully we see some more of this. I see the Jags either going 6-11 or 8-9, but I'm gonna roll 6-11 this season for them.
Okay, we got to be different. My goodness. All right. Well, so I'm the same.
We're paired up.
You really are. Again, it's honestly, it's making it easier to do this because it's, as far as we can just go through our stuff here and just, describe, bounce off each other. We're easy. We're on the same page. Yeah. 6-11 for me with the Jags as well. They canned Urban Meyer last year. Good call. Bring in Doug Peterson, coach the squad up, develop Trevor Lawrence. Good call. They picked first overall again.
Yep.
Not where you want to be after drafting your potential franchise quarterback and not where they thought they'd be, but they took Trayvon Walker out of Georgia. I think he can be a defensive cornerstone for years for them. Can be. He has to be because he was taken first. He can play all over the line. He can anchor in the run game, has great punch and explosiveness getting after the passer. Lots of people wanted Aiden Hutchinson. I know that. Coming out of Michigan, he ends up with Detroit, with the Lions. I like him a lot too, but I like Walker despite the knock on his collegiate career a little bit as far as did he underwhelm a little bit. But I think a lot of guys develop when they hit the league and can become with other new coaching and obviously played for a great program. Georgia just won the national championship, but I think a lot of guys can still develop and grow into what they ultimately can be. And I think that, with a good, at least competent coaching staff at this point, I think we'll see in Jacksonville, we'll see Trayvon Walker go into a decent situation. And, hopefully for Trevor Lawrence, he takes that next step as well. You mentioned that receiving core, they vastly overpaid for Christian Kirk. He's a number 2 or a number 3 as it stands right now, got number 1 money. He blew that market up. Yep. He'll be another target though. Marvin Jones. I still like Marvin Jones a lot out there. Zay Jones you talked about him bringing him in is big. And everyone's waiting for me. I've been saying this too. We've talked about this, but Laviska Shenault, I think that, he's a guy out of Colorado, I believe is where he played college, where he had a lot of plug. People were saying this guy's a versatile player. He's a good blocker. He's great in the pass game. He can do things in the run game. I think you can hand the ball off to the guy. I think I believe it's been a little bit since I've looked at what he did as far as, draft breakdown and what the play on him coming out of college was, but people were high on him. He can still hopefully become something. Everybody's waiting for him to take that jump. A big key for me here, though, that we didn't touch on earlier is Travis Etienne. He's coming back. He's going to be he was a big explosive player coming out of college. And I think he'll be a big explosive player again, as long as his foot is good and a focal point for the offense. We know he's got chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. They got drafted. They played together in college. They got drafted in the first round together. And we didn't get to see him last year. He's good in the pass game, and he's going to get a lot of touches and benefit stat-wise because of that. I think the Jags are going to get better, and they're going to double their win total because of that. Better, it's building block stuff. And for them, it's a better building block than some of these other building blocks we've talked about, because you potentially say we have a potential franchise quarterback, franchise running back. You have a potential franchise cornerstone on defense. You have Josh Allen, who's played really well at times too on defense. You have pieces that you say, okay, start to fill this out. We got ourselves a squad there. I'm not huge on Cam Robinson at tackle. I understand why they didn't want to lose him, but he's not that great of a tackle for me. They just overpaid to keep him, franchise tagging this guy. And like we've seen him do in the past. But I think that the Jags are going to be good. They're not good, better than they were. They'll have an upset win. No one sees coming. And you mentioned week schedule 6-11. I don't necessarily count the Lions. And again, I'm still stuck on the fact that we saw the Lions do that last year. Many games they should have won that they didn't win. So I can't necessarily count. I think the Lions are going to grind against anybody. But you're right. This division should cannibalize itself. Look at how bad they were last year, and look at they caught the Finns, the Bills, and the Colts. 3 wins that they had no business winning. 3 teams that were all playoff teams at the end of the year, potentially getting in. And the Jags, those are their wins.
Yeah,
They got those 3 wins. And the last one, the Colts needed it more than anything else.
That was their play-in. That was their playoff.
That was get in against a team that you should, and they just, for whatever reason, the Jags have been their bugaboo and they couldn't do it. So yeah, Jags 6-11, they'll be better. Probably one of those against the Colts, maybe 2 against the Texans. Like you said, these wins can kind of add up. But yeah, so who do you have in second? Because now I see we might be on the same page, but we might flip a little bit as far as record goes here. So I'm interested to see what you have to say.
So second, I have the Titans. I think this is the Colts division. I think the Colts did a lot to improve their roster, and we'll touch on that in a second. But the Titans are roughly the same team from last year. Their defense will still be great behind Jeffrey Simmons, Nico Autry, Bud Dupree, and Harold Landry, who combined for 32.5 sacks last season. That's crazy. Their front four was elite, and they dominated consistently. Their offense is where those questions pop up. You trade AJ Brown out, right? You don't want to deal with the contract negotiations hanging over your head over the course of the season. I get it, but you trade him. Julio Jones walks. I really like getting Robert Woods, but he's coming off, I believe it was a torn ACL, right, with the Rams.
Yeah, towards
So he's
ACL.
towards ACL. So what version of him are you going to get, right? That's a 2-year injury. I don't think it makes up for what they've lost, right? Picking up Robert Woods. Also, can Derrick Henry play up to the absolute monster levels he did for 8 weeks? They pounded him into the dirt until his legs, his treads literally gave out, right? He broke his foot or something. I forgot what the exact injury was. And then he was a shell of himself in the lone playoff game. Even so, this team was amazing last year. They had a ton of injuries. I believe they led the NFL in replacement players over the course of the season, and they still hit 12 wins. So they were one of the surprises, though. I don't think anybody really expected them to be 12-5. If I told you at the beginning of the season you're going to have 400 replacement players over the course of the year, is that a 12-win team? It's kind of surprising that they got there. Ryan Tannehill is a boomer bust quarterback. With all the injuries that piled up on them, they have a limited cap situation, so they couldn't do much this offseason to bolster their roster. So it kind of makes sense why they kind of stayed pat. I think they're still going to be a very competitive team, especially going for that division title. They're gonna fight for it, but they're gonna have to earn it. The Colts got a lot better. This is either a 9 or a 10-win team. I think 12 is a little out of reach, so I have them going 10-7.
All right. Now we're talking. We're on the same page again. I'm kidding. We're not. Now we're different. I do have the Titans here, but number 1 seed in the AFC last year. Gone is Julio Jones. He didn't do much for him, but also gone, and much more importantly, is AJ Brown. All right. They overachieved. They kept rolling despite the injuries. You talked about it. Injuries to Derrick Henry, Brown, and Jones last year. They signed Treylon Burks to try to replace Brown. You draft the guy in that same draft, you trade away AJ Brown, and no one's talking about that poor guy's draft status because no one remembers it because yes, he's the guy supposed to replace AJ Brown, but everybody's talking about the blockbuster trade that was AJ Brown leaving and going to the Eagles and giving them a number 1 receiver to pair with Devontae Smith. So I can't understand the logic behind this because we know what Ryan Tannehill is as a quarterback. At least I feel like I know what Ryan Tannehill is as a quarterback. And Treylon Burks might be great, but I'm not sure he's going to be Brown at all, let alone this year. Sometimes you just got to pay your guys. You got to pay your guys, Tennessee. It's just what you got to do because you build them up and you want guys that you've kept, that you've gotten, that you've built up, that, have been with you, that could potentially be lifers, great players, Ring of Honor guys. That's what every team dreams of. So keep your homegrown talent there as often as you can. You can't pay everybody, but they could have paid AJ Brown. I mentioned it earlier in the Carolina thing, but D'Onta Foreman is gone. He's gone to Carolina. He can kind of play like a poor man's Henry.
He did great.
He did do great. We know what Ryan Tannehill is. Like I mentioned, again, I mentioned every year, I mentioned every time we do anything, we talk about the Titans. And from what I saw for years with my fans, I like RT. I want him to succeed. We know what he is without a run game and no receivers. And based on that, what is this team? It's based around Derrick Henry, right? But how long can they ride Henry until he wears out? Because it's coming. He didn't play well in that playoff game, like you mentioned. But again, first game back, I don't want to put too much on that. I really don't, because that's his first game back. And, he hadn't played in a while, but we're thinking, oh, King Henry, that's what we're going to see. But running back lifespan is not forever. It's a short lifespan, and he's been ran down. He's gone a lot better. He's gone a lot longer than a lot of people would expect. And he's one of the probably people will remember as the most dominant runners ever because he's just so big. How do you take him down? I like Robert Woods, like you mentioned too, but Tannehill is what he is. And without a run game and without consistent receivers, and if he doesn't get that, I know he doesn't have a guy like AJ Brown now, and Robert Woods is good, but it's going to hurt him. It's going to hurt them. And I think Mike Vrabel's a great coach. I think they jumped as far as they could with Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. They've overachieved, getting the AFC Championship that first year, being the number 1 seed in the AFC the next year. It's a lot of stuff that I don't feel is sustainable. I think they've been punching above their pay grade here, punching above their weight class, and they're going to be looking for somebody else at some point this year. Ryan Tannehill, if he gets hurt or has to miss time or gets benched for whatever reason, we'll see Malik Willis. And maybe you see Malik Willis get pulled again, Tannehill go back in, depending on where they feel their playoff hopes are and how good or bad he's doing. But Willis is going to be a guy they look at for the future. And then they're going to potentially go get somebody else. And we've talked about this. Tannehill could end up on another squad, being a backup or starting as a kind of a stopgap guy for somebody who, if he's got the pieces around him, can succeed and have a good year like they did in Tennessee when they got into the AFC Championship game. You can do that with Tannehill, but long-term, he's not going to win you take over and win you games in the NFL, he can keep stuff steady. But he has to have that game. He has to have that around him. But he doesn't have pocket presence. I watched it for years. He still doesn't. He takes way too many sacks. Sacks that are on the offensive line aren't his fault. And then there's sacks that are his fault. He just did not get rid of the ball, fumbles in the pocket. And again, he's been a successful quarterback, had a successful career. But this is the big thing for me, because to me, the Colts got better at the best position and they added Matt Ryan, who is going to be the best quarterback in that division. I do think they'll probably split with the Colts, but I think they're going to fall off and they're going to miss the playoffs. Their defense, I do like their defense. I love Jeffrey Simmons and Denicho Autry up front. They're going to keep things nice, and they did for Harold Landry and Bud Dupree. You talked about the sacks last year, attacking the passer like that, but that can fall. That's not a year in and year out stat. That's something that could take a dip. And they've spent high picks on Christian Fulton, Caleb Farley, Elijah Molden, Roger McCreary. You talked about some of these guys. They have to step up, or the secondary is going to be the weak link. They've spent all those guys were top 100 picks, I believe. So high picks on those guys. They need to step up, because you can get after the passer, but eventually you're going to have to cover guys. It's a passing league. It's the offense, though, that worries me. Makes it harder on the defense. The offense is not scoring points. Again, I know I've harped and beat this horse on the ground on Tannehill, but I don't think they're going to score like they did last year. And there's only so many times you can keep replacing players, like you mentioned, with injuries. And that's why I think Mike Vrabel, as a coach, he's a good coach. He overachieved with that squad, and they did a lot more than they should have. I don't think that's year in and year out sustainable. The Titans go 7-10 for me. It's the playoff. I know I said a lot there, but I really want to drive this home that
7-10.
A lot of people are high still. The Titans are going to do it. Their defense is the part that excites me the most.
Yeah.
But honestly, yeah, I know what it is. And if Robert Woods comes out and balls, and Treylon Burks comes out and balls, and Tannehill has those guys, and if Henry doesn't take a step back at all, then we're talking about a team that's going to finish, like you said, I think 9-10 wins, 11 wins potentially, do what they did again.
That's their ceiling.
But eventually, where is that going to fall? Because eventually Henry is going to hit that wall. The way he runs, how he is, eventually it's going to stop. We're going to stop seeing those big runs, and he won't do it. Then he'll do it and be like, oh, is Henry back? Is Henry back? He's back. Look at him. And then he just doesn't do it as often.
Not to mention, it was a foot injury. It's a foot. That's the worst part. He broke a bone in his foot. You're constantly putting pressure on that. There's nothing that you can do that will take pressure off of that broken bone. It's like that. Well, like even if it heals,
put your foot up on a thing, like a wheel.
Yeah, but but then you're not playing, right? Like he's gonna be putting a ton of pressure. Like he's a heavy dude. This guy runs a 4.5 40. Putting that much weight on that foot every single time. He's an explosive athlete. Sometimes that's to a detriment when you have an injury like that. So he blew a tread. Like now, how are you going to fix that tread? You can't replace it. So what's the method? How are they going to do it? You can't run him the way they did for 8 games.
And I think that, again, it shows how good he is. I mean, look at where he finished, and he only played half the games as far as the rushing total. But that just shows you the reliance on them. And again, it goes to my point that every time Ryan Tannehill's been successful, because he's had big time run games. J.J., his best year in Miami, J.J. was quarterback or running back, and then he got hurt. Tannehill got hurt that year, and Fins made the playoffs that year, though, because of on the back of that great running game. And he just kind of had to, get the ball to the receivers and do his thing. And that made him more successful. And every quarterback, that's your job. It's a team sport. You want that around you, but it's just something different about it. We've seen him long enough. We know what he is. This isn't even like, to me, it's not even like a Sam Darnold thing. We've seen him suck for years, but he hasn't been in the league still that long in a good situation to say one thing or the other, where this guy has to have a run game to succeed. Or if you give him legitimate passing weapons across the board, he can maybe do something consistently, even if he didn't have the run game. So there's things, the jury's still out. I know what he is. I know what the ceiling is. I know where you're going to go with him. And I believe that it's a fallback year, because when is it going to happen? I think one more year of Derrick Henry doing it, I could see Henry doing that. And I could see this being wrong. I could see outside shot, he does it another year. But that's got to be it. This isn't going to be a sustainable product for 4 years, 3 years, 2. I think you got 2 years max. And I think the second year, if he does do it this year, you're really going to have somebody to spell him some carries, because he's not going to be able to be that guy every game, especially if you want to make a playoff run. You want to be able to run the ball when you get to the playoffs. You want to be able to run the ball and play defense when you get to the playoffs. Absolutely. Control the clock. And if the weather's bad in certain stadiums, but you can't expect a guy to run like that all season every year and then go into the playoffs and do that. It's just too physical, the most physical position. So
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
asking a
I
lot.
just think I just think that this is kind of my surprise. I think that they're going to finish lower than people think here.
I mean, I kind of believe what you're saying there, man. Like, I picked them winning towards their ceiling, right? I thought 12-5 was crazy last year, but that was, I don't think anybody was prepared for that. That was a
There's no way. There's no
surprise,
way they do that again.
right?
No way.
Yeah, there's zero chance. So I think 10 is their ceiling, and I think they play to it just because of how well run they were last year. I think they do it again,
Yeah.
even through all the problems that they like that accrued over the course of the season. But if their floor, you're aiming for their floor. I can respect that's a good choice, man. All right, let's move up. Number one, obviously the Colts. They would be better this year simply by replacing Carson Wentz with Matt Ryan, right? Like swapping the ups and downs for consistency, potentially not losing the biggest game of their season to what should have been the easiest game of their season. But they didn't just stop there. A team that led the NFL in Pro Bowlers just went ahead and added Yannick Ngakoue, one of the best rushers and edge rushers in the game, and Stephon Gilmore to shore up their already phenomenal defense. Not having Shaquille or his Darius Leonard, but he wants to be called Shaquille now. So Shaquille Leonard is definitely going to hurt. You don't replace all pro production, but he's on his way back, right? So when he does return from whatever nerve/ankle issues he had, that's a massive difference maker just on IR. That is just going to be a complete plus for you as long as he's past the injuries. They didn't improve their O-line much, which isn't ideal, but there were so many other additions that you just can't overlook. Although the receiver crop leaves something to be desired, this is still a phenomenal team. You still have probably the best running back in the game outside of Derrick Henry, if not better than Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. I think the Colts win this division with a solid record of 11-6.
11-6, huh?
11-6.
Oh man, so we're close. We're close here. Yeah, last year didn't go as planned. Carson Wentz situation failed. They need one more win over the Jags to get in. That's it. They couldn't do it. Matt Ryan is the quarterback now, and I think if Matt Ryan's the quarterback last year, they get it done. Ryan is just more consistent. He's less volatile game to game than Wentz was or is. They still have the 7th best scoring margin in the league and have what many consider to be the 2nd best running back in the game in Jonathan Taylor behind that guy we just got done dissecting in Tennessee, Derrick Henry. Michael Pittman had a breakout year last year, going for 88 grabs, 1,082 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think that Nyheim Hines is going to get more involved this year in the passing game as a running back. And Matt Ryan's going to help that a lot. Okay, on the line, they added 2 new starters, Matt Pryor replacing Eric Fisher. Danny Pinter should be a guard. They still have maybe the best lineman in football with Quentin Nelson, and having him healthy with Ryan Kelly is going to be huge. Taylor can do it all at the backfield too. He was tied for 2nd in the team last year with 4 in receptions last year, aside from leading rushing too. So the guy can do it all. Obviously, that's on the team receptions, not overall receptions, but he's a solid threat out of the backfield to catch the ball. So I like, obviously he's a full all around guy. They're going to run him like they're running Henry. A lot of that's going to be built around the running game in Indianapolis. So, for me, the big thing here too is they brought in Gus Bradley. Okay. He's going to run the defense. They lost Matt Eberflus because he's coaching the Bears. He'll try to make them a more aggressive defense. Eberflus relied a lot on zone schemes last year. It didn't work as well when you can't win and put pressure on the quarterback. Okay. Win one-on-one. You can't put pressure on the quarterback. So they have studs though. They have studs. Darius Leonard, you talk about Shaq, right? Darius Leonard, he is one of the best linebackers in football. DeForest Buckner is one of the best offensive or defensive linemen in football, excuse me. So Pro Bowl talent on 2 levels. Okay. Yannick Ngakoue, bring him in. 55.5 sacks in 6 seasons. You're right. He's one of the better pass rushers in football. So having him on the same line with DeForest Buckner is only going to help. That's getting after the pass. So that's going to be huge. He's going to have a better time there. The key to the secondary here to me is signing Stephon Gilmore. He's only 31. He's got a lot of solid football left, or he should. He just won Defensive Player of the Year a couple years ago. But can he find his groove again? Okay. Can he get back to being the guy? Because that's going to be huge. Well, who do you have on the other side? It's the second corner. That could be the issue. Kenny Moore, he's a slot corner and he's a Pro Bowler. He's a good one. He just made the Pro Bowl, but can he stay outside consistently if they need him to? They got to find that other guy. Okay. This division is bad. To me, this division is bad. And this whole thing is bad division. I mean, there's some big time bottom feeders in both divisions that we did, the Souths in general. I just think that the Colts best roster probably in this division and the best quarterback now. So I have them going 10-7.
Okay. 1 win away.
Yeah. Winning the division like that. The surprise for me is obviously for both of us, the only thing we really differed on was the Titans here. That's a surprise.
Yeah, where you pick their floor, I pick their ceiling. But I think we are kind of on the same page with what they are. I'm looking at it more optimistically. I'm looking at it with like rose-colored glasses, and you're just seeing like doom and pessimism there.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. I just think again, I know I feel like I've seen this story before. I've seen this with Tannehill, and I know what you're gonna get. And I think at some point Willis might be the guy this year. Injuries happen, but I think we're gonna be looking at Tannehill being a quarterback somewhere else next year. Stopgap, potentially trying to get it done one more time for a team. That's what we're gonna see. But I know what we probably won't see is I don't think we're ever gonna see, for the people listening, we're not gonna see us going across the board the same for 2 divisions in a row. We're
Yeah,
not going to have that again. We didn't do that last year. We didn't do that last week. We were close a couple times. We might have a couple picks the same. That's kind of commonplace for a lot of people. We're very rarely going to be different 4-1. I think we were once last year. And who knows? We totally might be this year. The AFC West is a good example of something that might
that's
throw us
completely
for a
unpredictable.
loop. Yeah, that's an unpredictable division, and it's the NFC West, but you got the Seahawks there at the bottom. We would assume the North, we might be different with how we view I think we'd probably be the same at the top with the Packers.
Yeah,
But same thing with the NFC or AFC North, excuse me. So, that could be up in the air too. I'm excited to see where we go with this, but yeah, I mean, right now we're across the board with just one really big difference, and that being how we view the Titans. But guys, I'm excited as always to keep this rolling for you. Next week, we'll be back with the North, just touched on that, then to the West, and then with our predictions for the first week of the season, which can't come soon enough. I am excited. I'm pumped. I'm ready. It's the best time of the year. Football is back right around the corner. Preseason football's on. I love it. It's great. Fall's coming. I'm pumping my pumpkin spice stuff. So let's roll. I'm pumped. Before you know it, basketball back too. It's just a great time of the year.
it is.
Although it's sad to see summer go, and it's on its way out. But as always, guys, thank you for listening to the MVP podcast. I'm Phil Van Pelt.
I'm Anthony Merrow.
We will see you guys next week.